The utility of data and AI have been through what you'd call an accelerated transformation over the last 25 years, since the widespread adoption of the internet meant we had information everywhere all the time in real time. Well, today's guest believes we're entering a third era, which will set the stage for businesses everywhere to capture the value of private AI and cloud as on-premises converge. G'day and welcome to the AI Forecast. I'm your host, Paul Muller, and join me along with leading companies and industry experts as we explore the past, the present and the future of data and AI in the enterprise every week, proudly brought to you by the amazing folks at Cloudera. Well, today's guest is a musician, an academic, an entrepreneur, an angel investor and former MD for AI and quantum computing at a global 50 financial services business prior to joining Cloudera, where he is Chief Technology Officer. Welcome to the podcast, Sergio Gago.
Thank you very much for having me, Paul.
It is
fantastic.
Great to have you here. I mean, quite a CV you've got. We're going to ask a few questions.
Absolutely.
But before we get into the detail, particularly talking about this third wave concept, we do a little something at the beginning of everything we call the lightning round.
All right, I'm ready.
You ready for this one? All right.
Let's go.
We have 4 questions. I might have a 5th for you today. Let's see how we go. First question. What would people who know you best, friends, family, work colleagues, say is your superpower?
Okay, we start with the easy questions, do we? That's a fantastic one. I think I know very well, or my powers are probably 2, if I may. One is I learn very quickly. I can get into a new field, a new industry, and by magical osmosis, really get deep into that topic. And that has allowed me to dive deep into many other industries or technologies, quantum computing. And that's how I entered AI a couple of decades ago and so on. And gets me to the right level so that I can use my second power, which is surround myself by really smart people, generally smarter people than me, and then put all of us together looking in the same direction into something that generates value for someone, to the world, to people, to a company, you name it. I've been doubling down on those 2 skills so that when I join a company as a CTO, for example, that's the first thing I try to do.
So let's talk about technology. You mentioned quantum computing then, which is, I guess, kind of the height of expectations as to what the future of computing could look like. But let's maybe go way back. What do you think the most impactful technology of all time was?
I think that the technology that has changed the world for the most has been the widespread of computers. And that has unlocked many, many different things. But the way I look at this in what would be, the 5th or the 6th industrial revolution, think about all the different inventions that we have created, from the steam engine, all the factories, the internet itself. Now we are at the convergence of many different technologies that by themselves would already unlock another industrial revolution. Say quantum computing could be an industrial revolution. AI is being a revolution itself, as in things that can change the economy and reshape the world. Now, the trick is that all of these technologies are exponentially growing each other and then converging. Mm-hmm. So look at it this way. You have AI, you have robotics, nanomaterials, space exploration, biomedicine, and all that stuff, neural link type of things, and obviously AI, robots, and all that is converging together. Robotics is advancing exponentially thanks to AI and LLMs and transformer models, right? Nanomaterials are helping robots and space exploration to go beyond and further. So I think this convergence is what is creating or changing the world in a way that I cannot even imagine how my kids will live into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you were talking then, my mind went back to sort of 15th century Europe and the Renaissance. It feels like we're at that point where the Enlightenment has come through and there's this convergence, as you say, of several different technologies at the same time. And it's just, it's taking us to interesting places. I'm excited to see where it goes.
I think in 15 years' time, we're going to look back and think that we're in the dark ages now. What a time to be alive, man.
It is pretty cool, I have to say. Hey, look, I'm going to change topics a little. We talk about AI and what it's going to do for business all the time on this show. But one of my favourite questions to ask is, what would you personally like to see AI automate for you? Forget about everyone else. What does Sergio want for Sergio?
I definitely want to have a humanoid robot in my house. ideally in the next 3 years or less, if possible, that does all my chores, does my laundry, folds my clothes, irons that, and so on. All those things that are things that we have to do no matter what. But what about we dedicate our time to be creative and to do new things and imagine and create new worlds?
I have to say, of all of the answers we get on the show, that is the most popular. So if you've got another entrepreneurial idea, that is a surefire winner. Everyone wants the same thing. Get rid of the nasty chores at home. Last question for you. Actually, I'll call it second last. I learned something as an executive about myself many years ago, which was I had this sort of unconscious competence that I would use when working with data. Particularly, I like to triangulate data, multiple sources to validate my conclusions or invalidate them. What sort of, I guess, best practices or hacks have you learned as someone who works with data every day?
So I think going back to first principles always helps. And as we advance in the world of data and AI, we get abstraction layers over abstraction layers, and sometimes we forget the basics. For example, statistics. One of the skills that I think is fundamental for anyone out there, if you're studying, if you're in college today, make sure you have your Bayesian thinking well set. That helps you with understanding data, but also with life. How do you change your priors?
I was going to say readjust your priors. Yeah,
it's so important, right? Our biases are natural, are part of being a human. Our society drives us towards those biases and our cultural context as well. So for me, that's the most important skill, understanding the basics on how statistics works and how managing and adjusting your priors continuously is important. Then you go and train a machine learning algorithm. That's going to be ingrained in your brain already when you try to identify, hey, this is completely biased or is a skewed data set or something, right? Those are tactical details and implementations.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice. I've got a last question for you. I thought I'd throw in, as a musician, just curious, what can music or being a musician teach us about working with data and AI, in your opinion?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. So I think music is something that you cannot rush, both the learning and the playing, and it's all about creating emotions. And emotions are a way of creating value as well. So when you work with data, first of all, you have different profiles. You have different, like in a band, you have different types of data. You have different ways of understanding that. But then what do you want to do with that data? Are you trying to influence a decision? Are you trying to make a strategic investment decision in your company? Or are you trying to build a recommendation system or something? So think about what is the end goal, regardless of how you're playing or regardless of the origin of that, right? So I think it's all about, going to a live concert and getting goosebumps. The same thing happens when you're building a new ML algorithm or you're playing with a new LLM and suddenly you're creating new worlds from scratch that before were not possible.
That's interesting. I just thinking about it, you got me thinking that, every business has very similar data. I mean, we all see the same economic data, et cetera, is in the same way that every musician has the same notes.
Yep.
But it's what the human brings to it in terms of reinterpreting it and rearranging them that makes the difference. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I don't know if you may have heard this song, The Four Axis of Awesome. It's this band that made a song that effectively combined 30 or 40 of the most known pop songs in the world, and most of the pop songs today use exactly the same chord cadence, the same four chords progression, and you can actually sing on top of that progression, and it's the same song, right? So it tells you how we humans are so adept to patterns. The reason we like certain type of music in the Western music style in the Western world is because that's what has been ingrained in our brain. We've been listening to those songs in the radio continuously. It's our biases as well. So in the same way, as you were saying, the same chord progressions, the same intervals is what we see in the data. You're doing, a fraud detection algorithm. It's the same labels, right? The same features that you're playing with, but your context in your company with your specific data, with what you want to do with that algorithm is what makes the difference. Almost like listening to the song on the radio or going to a live concert. And then the artist actually changed the song live and change the tempo or change the vibe a little bit. It brings a new instrument.
I love
fantastic.
it. It's a brilliant analogy. And it's a great segue to talk about the third wave. But before we do that, I gave you a brief introduction at the beginning, but maybe you walk us through your background because I think it's fascinating.
My background, I've been a data engineer for a long time. I started being the geek in the room. I like to code. I still like to code. I don't have as much time as I had before. And now apparently some machines are doing the coding for me. But I always like to tinker with things. So I became a CTO very early on my career, and I've been basically working through the different stages of the CTO, the CTO of your house, of your neighborhood, of your city. I've been very involved with the startups. I've been the entrepreneur building my own or co-founding companies and taking that from 3 engineers to 300 or to bankrupt as well, because you need to learn from all experiences, but always trying to be on the edge of what technology can bring, right? It's always, what if we do this with this thing and then we combine with this, can we solve this problem? My very first company, I was very lucky to partner with a friend of mine who was a far better engineer than me. So that sort of forced me to be also on the client side and on the product management side, trying to be a jack of all trades. And that has been my career ever since. Then I remember about probably 8 years ago, I was in the world of data. We called it machine learning back then, remember? Mm-hmm. Now everything is AI and Gen AI. And at some point I got bored. I said, look, this is not going anywhere. It's always the same problems with data, synthetic data. I want to do something new. And I went into quantum computing, built a company in quantum. But then obviously Gen AI came back and they brought me back into AI. But now it's beautiful how to combine those two worlds, right? And again, looking into the edge.
And I'd love to get you back on to talk about quantum at some stage, actually, because it's a personal interest of mine.
Don't get me started. I can be 4 hours talking about that.
But let's do a podcast on that if it's okay. I'd love to get you back to specifically talk about that.
So about 6 months ago, I got a call from Cloudera, and I thought, well, we are in a moment that is life-defining for industries and for people in general. So when you are bringing these new species into the office, right, a digital colleague, when you are changing the way you work, the way you live, effectively, do you want to be doing that for one company or for thousands of companies? And for me, that is what moved me into Cloudera, is in saying, hey, we're the ones building the shovels for many other people to go and dig for gold and do that in a way that is unique, in the sense of really bringing all the capacity from all the data states and combining my prior experiences, my nerdiness, if you want, if you will, with the capacity of a company that was at the center of big data since the very beginning.
The birthplace, exactly.
So it's both an exciting, amazing opportunity and an honor to be here.
I imagine a little stress-inducing as well, because you are playing with one of the original names of big data, aren't you?
Exactly, and even in my team, right? Many of the engineers in my team, they were the creators of Hadoop, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, I'm talking to a hero, and I'm here the CTO. It's humbling. And back into my previous point is surround yourself by incredibly smart people, and then if you're able to harness all that energy and power into one single objective, wow. The options are limitless.
I agree with you. So let's talk a bit about your vision. We mentioned this notion of the third wave and this sort of changing era of big data. What does the third wave of big data mean to you, and why is it so important?
We like to think about it in the history of Cloudera. We started with the era of control, right? Many companies had their data centers and needed to control their data. That's when Hadoop made big success. And the story of Cloudera and Hortonworks was, hey, let me take all these open source components, all these Apache open source components, and drop them on your side of the firewall with a nice enterprise SLA that you can trust and control. And that was incredibly successful, right? Then the cloud came in, and we entered what we call the era of convenience. Now you had teams with a credit card that can go into any hyperscaler and start playing with data, either for machine learning or for building dashboards, you name it. And it was so easy and quick to start doing things. It was so easy that it brought shadow IT in many enterprises.
In a big way.
Controlling cost, TCO, controlling governance of the data started to be a challenge, right? That was the story of cloud, and data is part of that story as well. That also changed the way you got into data. What do you mean by this? When I started in the days of Hadoop, being a data engineer was actually simple. Very difficult, but simple. So the ecosystem was small. There were 3 books that you needed to learn, right? The Hadoop ecosystem, and that's it. Then scale that to thousands, hundreds of nodes. That is extremely complicated. But there were effectively 4 databases for you to choose from. Not many options. Now, today, you kick a rock, and there are hundreds of engines, databases, and options.
I have to admit, I can't keep up. And sometimes I'm not sure if people are pranking me with the names of these different releases. You're like, is that a real thing, or is someone trying to trick me?
It's great for interviews. You add a Pokemon name into that, and I'm looking for a senior engineer who has 7 years experience with Charmander DB.
You know someone's going to release that now, don't you? Just to make it harder.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, right?
So it now is extremely complex to understand the world of data. There are as many engines and solutions for niche use cases that, don't get me wrong, are fantastic tools. But how do you make your pick? How do you design an architecture? We talk about Frankenstein architectures now, where companies have dozens, if not hundreds of components, and are suffering to bring them together, the integration tax. So the era of convenience brings this complexity. Now, fast forward, with the advent of AI and AI agents, and the regulation and the compliance requirements for many enterprises and startups alike, it's not that they don't have the need, how do you get the same controls and capacity of managing your catalog, your data sovereignty, your data governance, lineage, you name it, that we were very good at in the machine learning world? But when we were doing machine learning algorithms and all that, we had our catalog under control. But then Gen AI comes in, and all that's not needed anymore. You just need a small innovation team to go crazy and shoot from the hip and create value. No, you need to bring all those controls back, especially in large enterprises. At the same time, many regulations are forcing companies to use sovereign cloud, private AI, and we can talk about private AI later if you want, and absolute control of your supply chain. DORA in Europe for financial institutions is a good example of that, controlling your value chain and all your third-party requirements. All that is forcing companies and individuals alike to converge and manage both worlds, the data center and the cloud, and have the control and governance of the data center with the convenience of the cloud exactly in the same way. And that's what we call the era of convergence. How can you have the cloud experience with the controls of the first era of data all together in a single place that allows you to leverage AI to transform your company in a safe way that as a regulated industry, a regulated company, you can do that safely for your own people.
So when we talk about concepts like convergence, and even if we think about the canonical hybrid cloud of infrastructure as a service, it's always been appealing, but there's been a complexity tax that comes with trying to deal with that notion of hybridity, of on and on premises, of different operating models, different ways of IT working. Can you have convergence without complexity, or is it just a necessary byproduct of the flexibility?
I believe now we are in a moment where you can. So that is absolutely true, and that led to companies living in 2 universes. Even IT teams sometimes were different, the ones managing the cloud and the ones managing the color. So there was this divide. And there's the data that's in the color, there's the data that's in the cloud. You can train a machine learning algorithm with the data here or with the data here, but not with both. And that's what we need to fix, right? If you are to have a digital colleague, an AI agent that supports every individual in the company, that has the same controls and access that a human can have, right? You go with your access card in your company, and you cannot go into the IT server room with that one. Probably you cannot go into the HR files to look into your peers' salaries. We have pretty good controls on humans. Same thing has to happen with AI agents, which means that you also need to be able to access all your data everywhere. First of all, it's about breaking that divide on the folks on the data center and the folks on the cloud. The second leverage point is that technology now allows us to really abstract all those components. Sure, there's a different operating model. Of course, in the data center, you need to go and put blades in the rack and those type of things. But for the most part, that is abstracted or works in a much easier way. What we have done, and the acquisition of Tycoon, the company that we acquired before the summer, is to make sure that at the practitioner level, you have all that complexity fully abstracted from you. So you can run your workflows, say Spark workflows or Hive queries or add a Postgres database, you name it, in the same way that you would on the cloud, right? So when you use any cloud managed service with 2 clicks or with 2 Terraform lines or anything you want, you can have that same cloud experience, but on the data center. As a data practitioner, you don't need to think about what are the disks underneath my system, right? Or which VMs am I using? Is that EC2 or is that something else? That is the complexity that we are abstracting. And what we are creating that we called Anywhere Cloud, trying to go one step beyond the concept of hybrid, is really to have the cloud convenience, but managing both universes, the on-prem and the any cloud, effectively, right? Any multi-cloud environment. And we see customers, the customers that we are having with co-designing and as our early adopters, we see them manage with one single control plane, all their footprint in both places. And then you have 2 things, TCO improvements, because the colo is far cheaper than any cloud that you can have out there, but also from a private AI perspective.
And I wanted to talk to you about the private AI component because you've mentioned that a couple of times, and I personally, as a business person, I find it really appealing because I know when I go to say public AI systems, if 2 people ask the same question of a public AI, you're going to get basically the same. I'll use the music analogy. You're going to get the same song, right? It's going to sound pretty much the same as the next person's or the next company's. With private data, I have a tremendous competitive advantage that I can invest in and get long-term value from. So how does private AI help me tap into that? What is private AI? Maybe we'll start with that.
Private AI is the ability, in my opinion, the ability of controlling the whole life cycle of your AI systems, having absolute control of your system. Let me start with an example. Let's say you are a bank, and in your bank you have credit analysts hired, right? The people who check all the loans and the validity of loans and so on. If you're in private banking, those are going to be pretty expensive, right? This happens a lot here in our background. These people are very well-trained quants, right? Quantitative finance analysts and so on, and they have both the knowledge of themselves, of their financial institution, and also the ethos, right? The risk profile and all that. They are very well ingrained into the institution, into the bank. They may be in the US or in Europe, so they have also the regulatory context around them. Imagine you are the CEO of such a bank, and I tell you, well, I'm going to replace all your credit analysts for people somewhere. I'm not going to tell you where they are. I'm not going to tell you their credentials. I can change them overnight. I'm going to charge you per word, not for the quality of the word, but for each word they give you. And by the way, if something changes, like I may stop service tomorrow if I need to, and you're going to pay me per word. As the CEO of the bank, would you agree to that? Mm-hmm. Probably not, right? Mm-hmm. So when we use LLMs, that, don't get me wrong, are fantastic, and the third-party models are quintessential to what we're doing, but effectively we're doing that. If you don't control the life cycle of the model that you're using, you're effectively outsourcing without any control the brain of your company, your enterprise brain. So private AI is the ability of controlling the full life cycle of your AI applications, including agents. What do I mean by this? What models do you use? How do you deploy them? Which ones are approved from a compliance perspective? And how do you make sure that that model, the weights, everything inside there stays constant for as long as you need? If you have used GPT-5, which came out, 2 months ago, your GPT-4 prompts don't work as well anymore. You need to adapt to the new systems. So imagine you release a mission-critical system in your company that relies on GPT-4, then you upgrade to GPT-5, and suddenly you start getting hallucinations or bad answers. Mm-hmm. That's part of the life cycle of the model. Then You have data from your company that lives both in the cloud and on the data center. You need to safely bring that data into your model, either for training, fine-tuning, or any other techniques like RAG. That's what makes your model unique to you. Mm-hmm. And the competitive advantage of most companies today is the data, but also the skills. And I think this is a concept that is not that people don't talk enough about. What are skills? Let me say, if we take a P&L from any given company, you see, right, all the numbers, the revenue, operational margin, all that stuff, and you take the same P&L. You can also read that. We both can read English, right? And we can give it to someone else here in Wall Street, and all of us can read the same thing.
Similar conclusion, yeah.
But I'm sure that the chief economist of any of the banks here in New York would have very different insights than the ones I would have.
That's a good point, yep.
I can read that P&L and say, hey, this looks fantastic, I'm going to invest in this company. And the chief economist will say, you're dumb. Because of the insights, those are the skills.
Their domain knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not necessarily the data itself, right? The data adds context, but then your skill, your human capacity to drive insights from all the data that you have, that comes from experience, effectively.
Your priors.
Including your priors and biases.
Yeah.
That is the gold that most companies have. So that you have to bake that into your model as well. Mm-hmm. That's the whole pipeline. And that's how you create mission-critical, enterprise-grade agentic AI applications. Private AI is here to solve all those problems. So you have full control of everything, from the model lifecycle to the prompt management, to the lineage and profiling of your prompts, to the benchmark, absolutely everything that helps you move a use case from a POC, yep, from an experiment, into a true production workload.
So I want to have it, when we talk about topics like convergence, maybe less so private AI, I think we sometimes run the risk of alienating business people who'll see this as more of a CTO type discussion, a technical discussion. From your perspective, what does something like convergence do to unlock new use cases or business value that you couldn't get before as a CEO?
So I think that the CEO would always want the actual value, either in terms of ROI or cost reduction, you name it, right? Or value improvement on your company. Generative AI is just the conveyor belt for all those things. And from a CTO perspective, if I go with my technical jargon to talk about RAG and graph RAG and all the technicalities, I was going to say, get the hell out of here, Sergio. What's going to be the ROI of this, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, the second angle that every CEO has front and center is risk. Mm-hmm. Either from a FOMO perspective, yep, which is really important, or from, am I going to be the next company at the Wall Street Journal with a massive AI hallucination creating a great liability? Mm. So those two things are the two sides of the scale that CEOs are trying to work with in that sense. Gen AI use cases need to start from the business side. And by this I mean bring in compliance, governance, IT, cybersecurity, legal from the very beginning, so that it doesn't become an experiment in the garage that doesn't go anywhere. Once you start showing value in those terms is when you can take them to the enterprise and say, all right, now, and this is especially true in 2025, when companies are consolidating their efforts and looking into, hey, where's the money, right? Mm-hmm. Is when you need to find the enterprise solutions that help you drive all this together. It's not a new thing. In the era of cloud, in the era of ERPs, in the era of CRMs, we had exactly the same things, right? And I think that's the most important point for the CEO. How do we make decisions so that we're continuously innovating and making sure that we're changing the business all the time, but at the same time controlling the risk?
What do you think the biggest opportunity that businesses could prepare for right now is?
I don't know how businesses will work in 10 years.
Yeah.
I definitely expect that there's going to be more digital colleagues than humans. And that creates a massive challenge for most individuals and companies. For the executive teams, how do my teams change in the light of this? My operations, my whole ethos of the company. who am I, effectively? For us individuals, well, we're going to be working with agents continuously, and every single individual will have, I call them a Jiminy Cricket in your shoulder, supporting you continuously, or an army of them. So effectively, we're rewriting the rules of business. And normally, this is a change that when we had the Model T from Ford, right, come on, that was 2 generations since the very beginning, when the first cars started having accidents and people realized, hey, we may need some signals in the street and maybe some kind of traffic lights or something.
Yep.
All that happened within several decades. And cars were really small and didn't go far. But now is everything compressed into a single decade of absolute transformation. So in the same way that people think about wartime and peacetime CEO, we may need an AI-ready CEO.
Yeah. I think you're right. One of the questions I've got for you following on from that, though, in terms of expectations, we talk about agentic a lot. Look, my own experience working with a lot of the generative AI tools, and I will extract that or extrapolate that out, I should say, to agentic as a derivative, is that they are like dealing with a dumb intern a lot of the time. They're agents, and sure, they help you get 80% right or 90% right, but the emphasis on the 10% that's wrong, right? That's still wrong. And you've got to go and check a lot of homework. I find that unnerving enough when it's writing a document for me, where I've got to go back and then reread the document to make sure it's what I was expecting. The idea of agents talking to agents with content that's 80, 90% accurate, I find deeply unnerving. Does that resonate with you at all?
Absolutely, but at the same time, isn't that the same thing when 2 humans talk to each other as well? And you're not part of the conversation, but they're talking about you.
And that's why I bring it up, I suppose. Do we run the risk for non-technologists thinking that this is some sort of panacea, some sort of magic, and not applying the same guardrails they would for when engaging with a human? This is a human factors problem, really, isn't it?
Exactly, and human biases as well.
Yeah.
It goes back to my point on we have only a few years to adapt to this and to learn the system. Even think about 2023, when it all started, ChatGPT and so on. Everyone said, human in the loop all the time. Always reviewing the content, always checking everything. And now we're, running agents in the wild doing restaurant reservations for us. And then you go to the reservation and you say, oh, you got a table for 15.
Because ChatGPT can't add. They can't do math. Yeah.
What are you talking about? And it's also the dichotomy of the self-driving car, for example. We know that they drive better than humans, they have less accidents and so on, yet we focus on the liability of that one accident. But then we don't think about the many accidents that happen by humans just by being reckless or people driving under the influence or all that stuff. All that is a cultural change. And it's all about getting used and understanding the limitations and putting the right guardrails. What I imagine is that as an individual, you will be able to control how far you want to get into this system. Right? So, for example, my agent, my assistant, my humanoid robot at home, how far do I want this thing to go and to surrogate me based on my preferences? We may, we're getting into business and we have to negotiate the fee for my product, and we're just going to get our agents to negotiate the fee, and then we go to the bar and get a beer. I think a lot of that will come with people adapting to the reality and then seeing the value of these things, but at the same time, reaping the benefits. Once we see that the real benefits are us having more time to be more creative or to dedicate to the more human-ready work that we need to do, or the curation and the distribution, people will be more open to this world.
A quick peek into the future. I suppose you must spend a lot of time as a CTO imagining a couple of years out, thinking about the relationship between on-premises, cloud first, cloud only versus, data sovereignty, never leaves my data center. What do you see the future looking like in terms of workload mix out into the next decade?
The world is a bit of a mess now. We're now in New York. It's right the GA summit at the UN. There's a lot of stuff going on. Data sovereignty is in everyone's agenda at the national level. We have seen also this week many things going on from NVIDIA, OpenAI in the UK and other places, Project Stargate, and so on. So a lot of movements are in that direction. We at Cloudera, we are launching partners with AWS on the European Sovereign Cloud as well. I think it's really important that citizens have the right to choose and the right to control their data. And maybe I say that from the perspective of a European.
Well, and that's an important point. It's one planet, right?
And so that comes back into the point of private AI and so on, is how do you make sure that you control your life cycle, that you control who runs your robot at home and what happens to that data and what happens to all that stuff. So those initiatives are, in principle, supporting citizens to have control of their destiny, their data, and effectively the models that run their stuff. If you are to have a Jiminy Cricket, you want to know what type of cricket it is, right? And that is somewhat aligned with you. There's a lot to say. There's a lot to advance on this, and I'm sure as technology evolves, things will continue moving. But I do see one thing. Governments and institutions are moving faster than ever before, from lawmaking and regulations to putting working groups in place and so on. When we think about the data platform of 2030 and what is coming, like, I don't even know what's going to happen next year.
Well, that was going to be my next question.
But I know there's going to be a lot about control, a lot about combining the worlds where your well-governed data, whether it's on a server in your house or in the data center or a government-managed data center, together with the public information that you have, and making sure that you have state-of-the-art systems that help you extend your abilities as a human.
With that, really enjoyed our ability to talk today. Would love to get you back to talk about quantum computing.
That's a deal.
Awesome. I cannot wait. I'll have to brush up on my Heisenberg uncertainty principle for that one. If people are interested in learning more about your work, where can they go?
Anybody can find me on LinkedIn, easy. I'm the guy with the guitar on the profile picture, Sergio Gago, and easy to reach from there. And I also run a newsletter on quantum computing. It's called the Quantum Pirates, very in line with my persona. And also I have a book on CTO that is about how I like and how I see technology driven. It's called the CTO Toolbox. So that's also a great way to see how I drive all these things. And by the way, all the proceeds from that book go to two amazing NGOs in Barcelona that work in data.
Sergio, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
It's been great having you. All right, well, that's a wrap. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's conversation. If you'd like to do it, just drop your comments into the comment section below, or hit us up using the Cloudera handle on LinkedIn at Cloudera with your thoughts. As always, we've got a great array of guests coming up. So if you have enjoyed what you've heard today, and I hope you have, make sure to like, share and subscribe so you don't miss another drop. Thank you again to the amazing folks at Cloudera for hosting another episode of the AI Forecast. And thank you all for listening in. We'll see you next week.